I wanted to find a psychological reason for why people do absolutely nothing to buy their $1 million bunker and everything in between. Germany announced that they're going to spend roughly 10 billion euro. They're getting back into the bunker building business. If governments are spending billions of dollars on these things, why shouldn't I as well? The Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, the Peter Thiels of the world, etc. They didn't do it the right way. The kings and the earls and the barons, their power was not from the castle. It was from the people that the castle protected. Tribalism, collectivism has worked for thousands of years for humans to protect their tribe, to protect their area. If you're going to spend billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars on this, there's a better way than doing just a bunker or a bolt hole. We're seeing this growing sense of societal fragmentation. We're seeing environmental risks. We're seeing these fears of kind of under the radar technological risk, for example, artificial intelligence, and basically an overall fragmenting of the global order. Our brains were not designed to think about every single peril and every single threat that happens throughout the entirety of the world. It's psychologically unbearable. Polycollapse is a simultaneous or near simultaneous collapse of multiple systems. That's what I watch out for, because I believe that whatever collapse does come, when it comes, it's going to come exceptionally quickly. If the national government said, hey, I just want to let people know, you need to start saving some seeds, you need to start growing some things in your backyard, we may have some food shortages in our local grocery stores, it would free people out. What they don't want to do is spook the herd.
World War III is already happening.
This is a house of cards, and it is in the process of collapsing right now.
You're going to see an economic crash, the likes of which we've never seen.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Today on the channel we have Dr. Chris Ellis, who's a career Army officer and disaster readiness instructor. He has a PhD from Cornell University and 4 master's degrees. That's 4 more than I have. He's the author of Resilient Citizens, The People, Peril, and Politics of Modern Preparedness. We were talking beforehand, we have a mutual acquaintance, Bradley Garrett, who we've had on the channel before. He came down to our studio actually and did an interview all about his book, which was about bunkers. But yourself, you have also done a lot of research on this, and you take a more data-driven approach where you're looking at kind of the statistics of who are the preppers, what are they prepping for. This is what I hope to get from this conversation today is, what do we know about how much people are prepping? What is the trend? It's very seldom that we get these high-level academic conversations in preparedness, but I'm seeing it happen more and more, which is a nice sign because that means that this whole genre is starting to really mature and become refined, and that's a good thing. So welcome to the channel.
Thank you very much, Nate. Glad to be on. Thank you so much.
What can you tell us about the book? Like, why did you write this book? Why did you get into it? And how long have you been a prepper?
So lots there. So first of all, Dr. Bradley Garrett, I spoke with him several years ago. I met him right at the beginning of right before COVID and then right during COVID first kicked off. That's when we started to have a really deep friendship. And I was actually kind of mad at him. I said, Bradley, the book that you just published was what I was going to do for my dissertation at Cornell. So you kind of screwed me on that one. And it was a very jovial introduction to him. So I had to go find a new idea because I was going to write a book on bunkers and people who prepped with bunkers throughout the world. And that's exactly what he wrote. So I had to go back to the drawing board. So with that, what kind of fell into my lap right as COVID was kicking off was the Federal Emergency Management Agency of the United States of America started to release their raw data. It's their data sets of their National Household Survey. They've never done that before. They released it back in 2017, 2018 timeframe. So when they released it, that is kind of a gold mine for academics because we like to have new data sets that we can go through and analyze. So the nice thing about that too is it's very numerically based. So what I did is I took FEMA data and I analyzed it and said, okay, how many preppers do we have in America? And I've been analyzing it ever since. I've analyzed it from 2017 all the way to 2023. Ran the numbers through my dissertation committee, ran the numbers through Bradley and some other folks. And that is one of the keys to fame that I have right there is like actually being able to say the number in America is in this year, A. And then B, the other thing that I really wanted to do is I wanted to have a model that explained everything. I kind of want to have the unifying theory of physics, basically. Everything from why people do absolutely nothing for preparedness, why people do a little bit of preparedness, why that's so different, to why people do a lot of preparedness. So my model got peer reviewed, and it explains everything from nothing to the people who own $1 million bunkers in the middle of New Zealand.
Okay, so what did you discover? How many people are prepping out of the? Obviously, this is a sample of the American population, so we can't necessarily extrapolate it to the rest of the world. But what did you learn?
So this is what I found. So you have to have a number. Yeah. So you pick a number and I said, okay, based upon the research that I found, I would say that somebody who had 31 days or more, let's call them a resilient citizen, 31 days or more preps. And I also did a robustness criteria, which is a little bit more. I did one for 90 days. And I also did one for 97 days. 97 is weird because that's where FEMA cut things off. If you said you had 100 days of preps or 120 days of preps or 5 years of preps, they coded you at 97. So that was a FEMA falsity, but I put it in there just to say, hey, what are the kind of numbers we're looking at? So utilizing my lowest criteria of 31 days, I found that there was just under 10 million people that were preparing in America in 2017. The 2018 data set expanded a little bit. It included the U.S. Virgin Islands. It included Puerto Rico. It included Guam. So we got a bit of the territories out there as well. So that was great. I actually did some different analysis based upon CONUS preppers, people living in the continental United States versus islanders. And I found that islanders prepare at a far higher level than CONUS-based folks do. And I gave some reasons as to why and some analysis on that. But what I found over the years was this, is that we went from 9.6 million in 2017. That increased to 14.9 million right at the outset of COVID happening. And then after COVID hit, we hit a ceiling basically, and it kind of bounced for a while, right between 20 and 23 million individuals. The last number we had was 23 million in 2023. So let me just pause on that one for a second. Why did it kind of stop? Well, a few reasons. Number one, the American way of prepping is rather expensive. We tend to do a fear and gear approach. We tend to associate preps more than skills or more than community. Other cultures do it far more community-based. Other cultures do it far more nationally based. For example, Switzerland has more of a nationalistic or canton approach to it, like at their version of the state level, whereas Americans do things rather individually. And so we basically try to buy all the stuff that we have for ourselves. So it's more expensive. Well, people are losing their jobs in COVID, or they're not working as much, or we have more of the gig economy, or if you're a laptop person, it really doesn't affect you very much because you're just staying at home. But if you're going to work at Domino's Pizza or you're going to deliver things for Amazon Prime, you're still out there. So that cost, I think, what happened is a few things. One, people were like, holy crap, here's the big global pandemic event that everyone said I was crazy for preparing is happening. Now let me use my stuff. So their dwindling started to go down because they're actually starting to use their preps right now. And then B, it was expensive. And they didn't know, man, am I going to lose my job here in a few months from now? And so I think that kind of bounced for a while simply because of the cost. The second reason I think that it kind of bounced a bit is because of this thing called the 16% chasm. The 16% chasm is a psychological phenomenon for social contagion. So think iPhones or hula hoops or whatever social thing is going around. If it's below 16% in the populace of an area, it's still fringe.
Like you're talking about adoption? Adoption,
exactly. So if it's like whatever, people are picking up roller skating or people are picking up, pick the latest thing, freestyle rap, whatever. Is it really going to catch on to the wider populace? Around 16%, because of statistics, you're still a few deviations away from the norm, from the mean. And so it's still considered to be fringe. And so what happens is that it's very difficult for things to break past that 16%. But once they do, it explodes. Or it hits that ceiling and it collapses. So that's where we're at right now in America. And I think in the greater world, we're at that 16% chasm of, is preparedness going to catch on and just like ignite? Or is it going to hit that ceiling and then be thought, no, this is just too weird and go back down again? I don't know. I think it's going to explode just based upon the pressures of the world and polycrisis, which we can get into later. But right now it's at that 16% chasm where we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen.
So what is it, compared to the rest of the world? 'Cause you're saying U.S. and just Western culture, I suppose. Perhaps that's a bit too broad because Europe has a different approach to a lot of these things, but it's very consumer driven and it's subject to market fluctuations as well. Yes. What have you discovered in other more like collectivist societies in terms of their approach to prepping that might differ from us?
No, this is a great question. So international prepping, and we'll get into the 5 different prepper types that I had later on, but internationally, it is very culture bound and it is very threat bound. So for example, just this last few weeks, Germany, there was an article regarding Germany's preparedness, and they're getting back into the bunker building business. Why? Because they're relatively close. They're just a couple countries away from Russia. And they see the war that's happening in Ukraine right now, and they think maybe there could be a nuclear conflagration. And so they just announced that they're going to spend roughly 10 billion euro between now and 2029 on bunker readiness for their country. Okay, so that's one way that the national government of Germany is handling things. Then you go to Poland, which is actually a country closer. It has Belarus and it has actual Russia on its borders. Poland's been invaded numerous times in its history, but they're actually not taking the bunkerness as seriously, which is kind of perplexing. Why not? You're closer to the threat. And the reason is because culturally, Poland, because they've exploded economically over the past 20 or 30 years, they got kind of an individualistic streak. And so it's no longer a collective of the country preparing for things. It is now individuals doing things. So the wealthy are absolutely building bunkers right now. The moderately well off don't really have the funds to do a larger bunker. Maybe they're doing a panic room type style thing, but that's what they're looking at right now. You cross the water and go over to Finland and Sweden and Norway, and Finland especially. Finland also shares a long border with Russia, and they can house roughly, I think it's over 90% of their country in bunkers right now. So just one country away in either direction from Poland, you have a radically different approach, even though the threat of Russia is right there.
The communist cameraman just noticed that there's been some autofocus issues. So guys, this is an audio podcast. Put it on in the background and enjoy. Okay, so you were saying that there's kind of a difference in terms of this individualist versus national level of prepping. And I think that's very important for people to understand, because here we're like super solipsistic, we're very individualistic, and this is why we don't have like bunkers like on a state level. Or it's an interesting distinction there, because you're right, like Poland, because it's been more prosperous in a capitalistic sense, they've kind of strayed away from this more like communal national level bunker building blitz. This puts the burden of preparedness on the individual then, like in a society like the United States.
It does. Just to give two more examples, just so we can kind of round out the rest of the world. So Israel, a few years ago, they mandated what we're calling MAMADs. Basically, they're a protective unit, a panic room that has ballistic resistance to incoming Palestinian rockets and mortars. So they mandated those in their new dwellings. Taiwan's been a very interesting case study as well. Taiwan, because they have the threat of China across the Taiwan Strait, their government tried to push preparedness as well for their citizens, and they kind of botched it a little bit, but at least they got an A for effort. But it allowed psychologically the populace to say, okay, my national government is now telling me this is something real. And so there was a slight fragmentation among Taiwanese preppers. They prepped in roughly three main ways. One was very militaristic. Hey, we want to be very anti-militia, anti-China. If China comes in, we're going to have militias, and we're going to be able to move around and communicate, shoot, move, and communicate, and fight off China, kind of like guerrilla warfare. There was another group that was far more of the tech bros, for lack of a better term. Hey, here's the new coolest stuff. I got this life straw. I got this. I got that. And the other group was just like kind of an all hazards approach. So these countries are going to have different ways to work on their preparedness based upon what their country at the national level is telling them, and then what's kind of sociologically and societally accepted, and then what they can do at an individual level as well. So all these things are a miasma of how preparedness is happening throughout the world. I can go on, but these are just some numerous examples for you.
Well, I think it's really important to understand how your nation approaches preparedness, right? Because we can't really rely on our governments to be able to mitigate all the threats, because we have a much bigger country. Well, I'm speaking in Canada, but also in the United States, just a huge landmass, which organizing something at the federal level would be very complicated, and you probably wouldn't want that anyways, let's be honest. So maybe we will see a resurgence in fallout shelters and things of that nature, but I think, preparedness is in the United States anyways. It's a very personal thing. You had this typology in your book about the different types of preppers. Yeah, what are these 5 different types of preppers that you talk about?
So I split the group into 3 different parts. people politics, people, perils, and politics. We discussed a little bit about the politics just before this. So now let's go into the people. The people were the best part of the whole book. I loved talking to individuals, hearing their stories, or reading about their stories of other people that had interviewed them, because I just found it fascinating. And I wanted to know if there was a typology that I could use, not just for America or the West, but it was international. It could go to any country and be utilized. And I found it was exceptionally robust. I could take these and move it to Taiwan or Australia or Israel or any other country. And so here's the 5 typologies. And what a typology is basically this. The typology is basically a heuristic, and it's a rule of thumb. It doesn't have to be exceptionally rigid and exact. And you don't have to be just one of these typologies. Some people start in one way and then they branch out to others. So let me go over the 5. The first one's the easiest to understand. Most people know this one. It's the homesteaders. It doesn't matter where you're living at. It's your small plot of land, your backyard garden, whatever. But your motivations are basically health, food insecurity, pestilence, maybe fear of contamination. And we've seen this throughout history. You could go all the way back to the Peloponnesian War when they worried about health. There was a plague in that first city that wiped out 25% of the population of Athens. People had pustules on their bodies that damaged their appendages, their genitals. 600 years later, we had smallpox that reduced the Roman Empire by 10 to 30%. So homesteaders have been around for a long time. They basically just want to have their little plot of stuff and be able to feed themselves, feed their family, be robust. So that's homesteaders in a nutshell.
And would you say that homesteaders, that one kind of transcends political lines, doesn't it?
It does. It's one of the most acceptable to left of center preppers that I've seen by far. So you can be an urban garden individual, in the outskirts of Brooklyn or Chicago, and you can be someone who's right of center, who's living in Wyoming and has 100 head of cattle as well. It's very robust politically. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I've always thought, you go far enough on the political spectrum and the rednecks and the hippies seem to find common ground somehow.
And what's nice about that, too, is that this isn't something that America's never tried before holistically. We used to be a very robust society for growing our own food, but we've had ups and downs as well as with this. So, for example, we had a National War Garden Commission before even we had the Victory Gardens. In World War II, for the Victory Gardens, we had 20 million in America. They produced 10 billion pounds of food during the war. That was 40% of all vegetable production in America.
So a Victory Garden, was there like a set sort of template for that, or was it? There
was a phenomenal commission that the federal government said, hey, these are templates, is the Three Sisters for growing food, and other examples as well. They gave diagrams. You could find things in like Popular Mechanics or Popular Science, I can't remember which one it was, or Life magazine that said, want to build your own Victory Garden? Here's some examples. And they absolutely gave out a government approved template based upon where you were living. So you compare 40% of your food coming from that and 20 million Victory Gardens to the estimates are we had at the height of the Cold War, at the height of the bunker building in America in the 50s and 60s, just 200,000 private bunkers. So 200,000 bunkers versus 20 million Victory Gardens. Pretty massive spread there.
And what do you think that is like right now in terms of like we're very dependent on the just-in-time delivery system now. So we've strayed so far from that Victory Garden mentality.
We have. What I like about this is that people really want to eat healthy. So it doesn't matter if you're getting organic tomatoes from the farmer's market or you're learning how to raise bees like my wife is right now. She picked up bee raising last year and we absolutely love it. We've harvested honey. It's just amazing. But it's a nice thing that that's not red coated or blue coated or left coated or right coated or by race or gender, anything like that. Anybody can garden. You can grow apples, you can grow tomatoes, you can grow squash, you can grow corn, you can grow, medicinal herbs as well. And people are really enjoying that. So it's a nice segue to get into things, and it's very scalable. It could be something on your kitchen countertop, or it could be an acre plot in your backyard.
And it's interesting that they're not encouraging people to do that at this point. Like you'd think the government would say, okay, we understand food is a little bit expensive. I wonder if there's like pressure from food companies, and this is where we get into the realm of speculation, but maybe there's some pressure by Big Agra or something to not have people do this because it would cut into their bottom line, or maybe even the medical industry because people would be eating healthier and they would be not as dependent on various types of medication and bariatric stuff. What do you think about that?
I think there's some definite truth to that. So there's a bipartisan bill right now. So it's sponsored by, and this is an American example, by an American representative and a Democrat representative from two totally different states. And it's called the Prime Act. And the Prime Act basically says that rather than take our cattle, our beef to go be slaughtered at a USDA approved facility, we want to have basically a more of a localized slaughtering process. And that Prime Act has not been passed right now because of industry pushing back on the ability of individuals to have more of a localistic approach to the way where their food comes from. And it's undercutting a lot of these individuals that you go buy from your local farmer, and he has to follow different rules. He has to charge higher rates or lower rates, or higher rates to get his food out to you because he's not taking it to the USDA approved facility that's maybe a state or two away. So yes, absolutely. And then secondly, in a general sense, there's this thing called state failure. State failure applies to politicians, not the local populace and folks. What state failure is this: politicians have to walk a tightrope as far as what they tell their populace. This goes across in any type of a country in the world, from America to North Korea, it doesn't matter. What they have to do is basically say, hey, this is what the state is going to provide for you. These are the kind of the basics of a state. We're going to provide X, Y, and Z. And what they don't want to do is spook the herd. And so if the national government or even a state government, Ottawa or Manitoba or Chicago said, hey, everyone, I just want to let people know you need to start saving some seeds. You need to start growing some things in your backyard because, we may have some food shortages in our local grocery stores.
Costco would be wiped out in a day if they said that.
It would freak people out. And so the national government has to be very careful as far as what it broadcasts out to folks for fear of, voter retribution at the ballot box, because the government just scared me too much and told me I'm not going to be able to get my food at Costco or Walmart or wherever you shop.
Yeah, and even if they are kind of well-meaning, and even if it's not because they're worried about a supply chain collapse, we just live in the age of rumor and social media. So it'll be twisted into a political thing. Look, this politician wants you to grow your own food. They can't even, that sort of thing. So it'd be politicized very heavily, which is unfortunate, because if you were to put like a sticker price on the food that you can grow in a moderately sized greenhouse or in a few garden beds based on today's prices, I mean, it's in the hundreds, if not thousands of dollars that you can save.
It is.
So, and even that honey that you guys got, we did honey this year as well, and we must have got like thousands of dollars worth of honey. It's becoming more financially lucrative for people to do it, whereas before, when the price of food was relatively cheap, maybe there wasn't as much incentive to do it. But now people are probably going to have to be like, it might make sense to do that, not only from a health point of view, but from a financial point of view.
Absolutely. And it just supports your local community as well. I'm trying to, I can't do everything locally. I can't source everything that I want to buy locally. But if I can support my local raw milk farmer or my local person that gives me cheese or other things, absolutely, I want to do that because I want my community to be as robust as it can be. Absolutely.
So homesteaders was the first one. And I got to say, I wasn't always a homesteader, but I find myself becoming one. I see preparedness as a journey from the urban dependency kind of progressively more so to the rural environment, which is why I view this typology as more of phases, almost kind of like stages.
Yes.
And everybody kind of enters in at a different point, perhaps. But okay, so what's the second group?
So the second group are the ones that doomsday preppers kind of made infamous, and that's the Sentinels. The Sentinels it's very simple. They're the gun group. So the Sentinels are motivated by governments of tyranny, of subjugation, of war, of genocide, too much government, or the exact opposite, too little government. They're also motivated by a combination of too much and too little, this concept of anarcho-tyranny. Anarcho-tyranny is the concept that the state chooses not to protect you, but does not allow you to protect yourself. Right. So the Sentinels are motivated by all three of those. It really freaks them out.
Want to get a taste of that? Come to Canada. We are the quintessential anarcho-tyrannical society.
I've seen that. I've heard that before. I hear it about Europe as well, all over Europe, Germany, Britain, Ireland now, et cetera. Yes. So Sentinels are the gun group, and this is the one that has kind of been exported to the world in a negative sense. And so when I talk to people that are living in Denmark or Sweden or other countries, they're like, "Oh, don't call me a prepper. Prepper, that's the American gun group. That's the individualist. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be associated with that. Don't use that label on me, prepper. But I'm a homesteader. I'm a one of these other ones." Okay, understandable. So, but the thing is that the Sentinels, again, all five of these groups, none of these are crazy things. These things have happened before. So there is violence in America. There was a survey in 2024 of Americans, and it found that 61% believed that a world war would occur in the next 5 to 10 years. And 2/3 of them thought the nuclear weapons would be used. More than 10% of Americans, when they were surveyed, thought America would lose this conflict. They did a comparable survey in the United Kingdom. They found that 21% thought that the Western nations would not win that war. So there's a lot of pessimism out there, and it drives this. I need to protect myself at the base level possible. Grab my modern day of a sword. I have my gun now, and I'm gonna stay here on my homestead or my home is my castle, and I'm going to defend it. So, and we've also seen, unfortunately, we've seen genocides that have been prosecuted by states. After after Lenin took power after World War One, or in World War One, and then afterwards they had a civil war, and then he did gulags and famines. They lost 25 million Russians. They lost 1.4 million Russians in World War One. They lost 25 million Russians in the civil war and the famine afterwards. So people have a right to be scared in a martial sense and be able to want to defend themselves in a martial sense as well. Those are the Sentinels.
Is there a statistic that you have for, or is this typology not really based in stats in terms of, is there more Sentinels and homesteaders, or?
That I can't determine, because again, these things kind of bleed over. Some people might start out as a homestead and they're like, man, I have wolves or I have other predators. So I need to be able to have a gun as well to shoot the wolves that are attacking my cows or my chickens, coyotes, etc. So no, but what I can do is I can look in an American sense, I can look at background checks for the FBI for guns, and I can see spikes. The Black Lives Matter riots and COVID in 2020 made massive spikes in the amount of background check requests to the FBI. It's come down a bit. It usually spikes around elections, especially if there's a transition from Republican to Democrat or vice versa. So events like that, people are like, man, the government's going to come to get me because my person lost, drives gun purchases. It's not necessarily a one-for-one for them becoming a Sentinel, but it does encourage that behavior. And then we have other things that happen as well, these crime events that happen that just say, hey, I need to go out and I need to be able to protect myself, protect my family. When I'm going on the subway or other places, I'm going to go apply for my concealed carry permit, etc.
So there's a fear of violence, which drives the Sentinels. And then there's a fear of starvation and just maybe being dependent on critical infrastructure that drives the homesteaders. Mm-hmm. And so both of these are very essential, of course. I mean, maybe it could be argued that the Sentinels put too much emphasis on the violence aspect, perhaps too much influenced by Hollywood and the depictions of the zombie apocalypse, and not really having their preparedness arrested at that level of just shoot the bad guys and things will work out, as opposed to the multifarious aspects of preparedness that require all kinds of knowledge and skills.
And there's a psychological thing too. So people, they look into prepping and they're like, oh my gosh, there's so much that I have to do. I have to learn how to shoot a gun. I have to be able to raise crops. I need to do animal husbandry. I need to be able to shoe a horse, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, so they start somewhere. And so these journeys are all different. There's usually a motivating event in their life that happens, or it's something they've done culturally for a long time. But it's one of those two. It's either something they've been doing since birth because they were raised in the American West or in a rural area, so they've been shooting squirrels since their childhood, or an event happens that says, hey, I need to do something. But it starts their preparedness journey, and they usually do branch out into others as they move along. Just like you said, you're moving along in a homesteading. This is very common. Most folks don't just stay in one.
The government kind of wants a monopoly of force. They don't want people to defend themselves. So there's a stigma against self-defense in the first place, which is not a big deal in the United States. But I think a lot of people, they have a hard time wrapping their heads around the gun thing, because they view it as being politically associated. But eventually, like you're saying, I've had hippie friends who eventually they get a shotgun, right? Because they realize the practicality of it at some point.
Yes.
When you're a homesteader, if there's a bear or a wolf or coyotes that are eating your chickens or doing whatever else, then you have to kind of deal with that situation. So there's a practical aspect, but also in the sense of there will be situations if we see a breakdown of rule of law that you have to defend yourself because you can't rely on the government or emergency services to be there to protect you. So maybe some people take it a little bit too far. I think the Sentinel is kind of the fun part of prepping, It's the shoot 'em up. It's the exciting, the action component, right?
Yep.
So what about the third group?
So the third group are the ones that are my favorite because I think they're the furthest along. So the reason I say that is this. World War II, in an American sense, and really in a Western sense, really changed the face of the globe. So before World War II, and for 6,000 years prior to that, we were still rather tribal. Yes, we had a few people that are out in the Wild West, and they hitched up their wagons, and they went out and they got their 40 acres and a mule in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. Okay, I got that. But they were still a collective for the most part, and tribalism, collectivism has worked for thousands of years for humans to protect their tribe, to protect their area. You can go all around the American West. You can go all the way all through Europe and other areas. Europe has got more castles than anywhere else. Why do they have castles? Because they attack each other all the time. So we're moving back to this. And the interdependence are the ones that are most community oriented. And that's kind of where we need to end up at the very end of this preparedness journey. We need to end up back realizing that we can't do it on our own. We have to depend upon our community, upon our neighbors, upon our locality, etc.
So the third group is called interdependence?
Interdependent. The interdependent are the third group. And they're mutually dependent. They're supportive of one another. They're the neighbor you definitely want to have when the winter storm happens, when the earthquake happens, when the tornado happens, when the hurricane happens, because they have their stuff together. They have the knowledge, they have the skills, and they're just friendly individuals. They're the far more open preppers. They say, I'm a prepper, raise their hand proudly, and they say, I want to help you to be a prepared person as well. I want to help you increase your resilience as well, and not just you, but the whole community. They're usually not driven by a single disaster category like the other ones are, but they practice basically generalized resilience. So they're like, hey, I want to go and increase my medical skills because I might have to use my medical skills if there's a car accident, if my friend's kid falls off the trampoline, if a tornado strikes and someone's trapped in their home and they've got a broken leg. So they look at disasters as very multifaceted, and they say, what skills can I develop that will help out in numerous different types of things? And they also really like to rehearse as well. So they'll go out and they'll join the CERT teams, the community emergency response teams. They may go out and volunteer to help out with FEMA or be a part-time FEMA associate and go to Jamaica and learn skills there and then come back to their community. They may work at their volunteer fire department, et cetera, but they're building those communal skills, those generalized resilience skills, and they kind of focus on this more ecology of things more than engineering. They're trying not to develop the better mousetrap, but they recognize that sometimes that 1 in 1,000 year flood happens and they want to be ready for that thing. So very generalistic, but very open to folks. Like I said, they're the ones that are the furthest along in the prepper journey.
So they're not necessarily living in a community, they're just community oriented.
Correct. They can be both. There are definitely communities that try to be more resilient writ large. We see that in Japan, for example. So I'll give another international example. There's an active volcano in Japan called Sakurajima, and it's about 10 miles from the city of Kagoshima. Well, this volcano erupts about 500 to 1,000 times per year. So it kicks out a lot of pyroclastic ash on a regular basis, and that ash comes downwind and kind of rains down on Kagoshima. And so what the people do is they all have this cultural practice that they go out, and when they see ash falling, they go and they sweep it up or they remove it. They have removal practices. They have these community attitudes, and there's a 90% compliance among the populace for removing this ash when it comes down because it protects the entirety of their jurisdiction. So that's an example, a non-American example of people coming together that are interdependent in nature to protect their community from a realized threat.
I can see the interdependence. These seem to correlate with like stages of, I think it's Erik Erikson, the stages development, where you have people kind of reconciling various conflicts within themselves at different points in their life. Mm-hmm. And, like the older you get, you can kind of go into isolation and you can alienate yourself from the rest of society, or you can get into this period of generativity where you are kind of looking outwards and trying to build for the next generation, as opposed to just focusing on yourself, because eventually it becomes like this recursive thing and you can kind of go crazy with it, right? If you're just out there living by yourself, like, what's the point of that? I mean, we're a part of a much broader species, community, whatever this is. And so I think some people get into the mindset of it's all about me, it's all about my family. But eventually, like, who are your kids going to marry? You know, they're going to have to marry the girl down the road or something. So there's going to have to be a community there at some point if you really want to see this survival thing to its thrival level, right?
Correct. The last chapter of my book, I begin it with this quote. It's a Greek proverb, and it says this: "A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they know they shall never sit." And it's this longevity. It's this thinking out beyond just you. It's thinking about, how are my decisions right now going to affect my grandchildren? How are my decisions right now going to affect, my neighbors' children, et cetera, that are for posterity and going out further and foremost. So absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I think that's really important because, there's a lot of preppers who are, they're getting up there in life, they're past middle age, we'll say. And at that point, the question of purpose and meaning comes in to play. And I think it's good to hear that. I think it's good that we try to encourage people to look at things through that way. Even myself, I'm already looking at my current homestead and I'm thinking about, these trees that I plant, I'm probably not going to be able to really truly enjoy them when they're in their maturity. 30, 40, 50 years from now, maybe somebody else will. Maybe it won't even be my kids. So you really got to get in that mindset of seeing things beyond yourself. And I think it can actually make prepping more fulfilling on many levels.
And we see people in the homesteaders do this as well. The regenerative agriculture crowd, where they want to make the soil healthier again. They want to bring back actual healthy living dirt that's good and has worms in it and bugs, et cetera, for the holistic health of their posterity as well. Yeah, we see these crossovers all the time as well. Yes.
What is the fourth group?
So the fourth group are interesting. The fourth group are the NOAAs. They are the bunker group. So very easy to understand. And I do have a delineation here in the NOAA group for them. If you just have a bunker or panic room, I don't consider you to be a resilient citizen, because in me, the citizenship is just as much as important as the resiliency part, because again, I'm pushing this community-based typology of things. So you can have a bunker, but you have to have a bunker that's part of a community. So it's not just for you. So a great example of that, Dr. Bradley Garrett again, a few months ago, he visited Vivos X Point in South Dakota. And he said, when this thing first kicked off, it was just a whole bunch of folks, just buying their $10,000, $20,000 bunker, whatever it was. And they got it, and it was kind of very individualistic. But he goes, now they're just a few steps away from having like a homeowners association. And so it's an actual, no kidding, small village is now developing. So I would consider those folks to be NOAAs. But the NOAAs do truly look at the very large, apocalyptic type events. So they started out as years and years and years ago, they were the ones that basically built the castles. And in today's day and age, these bunker folks are the ones that build things for extreme civil strife, a nuclear strike, things along those lines. But the real biggies, those are the NOAAs.
Okay, so a NOAA, there could be homesteading elements, there could be sentinel elements, but the defining feature is the subterranean place of refuge.
Correct. Or something along those lines. Something that's very akin to that is called a bolt hole. So if I have, and we see a lot of, this is anecdotally, I can't prove this, but the NOAAs seem to be the very rich crowd. So the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, the Peter Thiels of the world, et cetera, that can hop on a private jet, fly to Kauai or fly to New Zealand to their bolt hole. They may not have an underground bunker, but they've got a country.
A bolt hole?
Bolt hole. A bolt hole. It's a place of refuge you can basically bolt to. And it's not quite an actual physical hole, but you bolt to this location and you escape things. So Uruguay, New Zealand, Singapore for some folks, et cetera. But you escape the madness for a while because you have the financial means to do so.
So these are people who are preparing really for the big events, whereas the Sentinels might be preparing for like the initial phase of breakdown society. The Homesteaders preparing for a more long-winded attritional style collapse.
Yeah, the other thing that's interesting about the NOAAs is that they do tend to cluster again because of and it could some of this could be the wealth effect of what's the billionaire next door doing to me? What's Jeff Bezos doing? I need to do the same thing. What's Elon Musk doing? I need to do the same thing. But when you look at them, they do cluster in two areas. One is Silicon Valley, and the other place is Wall Street. And there's an interesting reason as to why that occurs. Both of those places, Silicon Valley and Wall Street, have a lot of individuals that deal with fat-tailed risks. So these are people that are hedge fund traders. They trade millions upon tens of millions of dollars on a regular basis. They see ones and zeros flash across their screen in yen and in euros and in dollars, et cetera. And they understand that there's the 2007, 2008 financial collapse, and it happens like that. Or there's another thing that takes off and it's the unicorn and it becomes the next NVIDIA, et cetera. So they see these fat-tailed events and they go, well, it's logical for me to look at this and say, this economic collapse, this grid failure, this nuclear war might be a sub 1% chance. But if I have a net worth of $200 million and I invest $2 million of those dollars into a bunker, or $2 million of those dollars into my bolt hole in Uruguay, well, and I have to use it. Well, man, I'm escaping. Sucks to be the rest of you guys in New York. I've got my flight out of here, but it's very risk tied to. And then the folks in the Silicon Valley, they're chasing AI right now. And it's like the singularity. When AI takes over, we have the Terminators. It's like, man, I got to get out of here immediately. And so it's this risk thing as well that they're looking at. So for them, it's very logical for these fat tails.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been concerning to me that the people who we consider the most prosperous, in some cases, the most intelligent, are the ones who have these bolt holes. But that seems to be missed by the majority of the population. Like, people just dismiss that as, those crazy, rich, smart people. What do they know? Like you're saying, it might just be a consequence of, okay, they're looking at the numbers and they're saying, well, it's only 1% of my net worth that I have to commit. I could have bolt holes everywhere if I'm, Elon Musk, and it would barely, put a dent in my net worth. But then there's also, there seems to be a recurring theme and trend amongst these people that it's not just that they're kind of hedging against something that has a one-off chance, that they actually think something bad is going to happen. And maybe, and it's because they're smart and they see the risk, right? They see how vulnerable the system that they've kind of created is, I think.
Right. And for these individuals, again, if you're trading in these dollars and, Silicon Valley and Wall Street, et cetera, a lot of these folks have, government connections, government contracts, et cetera. And so they get, privy to what's behind the curtain as far as classification. And they see these things that, countries are preparing for. What is China preparing for? What is Russia preparing for? What is America preparing for? And they're like, well, holy crap, if governments are spending billions of dollars on these things and the government thinks that they need to do that for continuity of government or continuity of operations, why shouldn't I as well? The biggest critique that I have of these individuals that are NOAAs, that are not doing it in a communal sense, that are just kind of saving themselves and their private security team, is that they didn't do it the right way. If you're going to bolt hole for a couple of weeks or even a month, or you're going to take off for 3 months because of COVID or whatever, okay, that's more understandable. I don't want to fully, give you 2 thumbs up on that one. But the issue is that they didn't go back the right way and to look at the past. You had kings, you had barons, you had earls back in Europe that had these fiefdoms, that had these castles, etc. But the kings and the earls and the barons, their power was not from the castle. It was from the people that the castle protected. And these high net worth individuals that bolt hole and get away, if they're thinking they're going to last something that's going to go for multi-months or multi-years with just their personal security attachment of their retired Navy SEALs and their money, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen, because you're going to lose out on, where's your dentist? Where's your orthodontist? Where's your podiatrist? Where's this? I mean, all these different specialties that aren't there. Where's the person, your mechanical engineer, that's going to fix your radiation sensor when it goes down? Blah, 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 blah. All these different things. They're not buying into community. The barons and the earls and the kings had a community to protect them. These Noahs don't. So they might last a little bit. They might last a few more months than the rest of us do if something truly apocalyptic happens, but not much longer than that, unfortunately, because they don't have the community structure. If they wanted to be better, it'd be better for them to go to like Jackson Hole or Idaho or Kansas or whatever and buy into a community that was going to protect them writ large, almost basically like buying into their own fiefdom. That's a better way of doing things. I'm not saying we should have fiefdoms across America, but if you're going to spend billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars on this, there's a better way than doing just a bunker or a bolt hole.
Absolutely. Well, they're probably banking on humanoid robots and AI to do all the specialized work, which I think we're still a few years out from that yet. So we have the Noahs, and then what is are we on the fourth or the fifth? I can't remember.
We're on the fifth. We're on the final group. So the final group, I didn't call them Noahs. The Noahs and the faithful. The faithful is the last group. They split a little bit. The Noahs are the ones that are kind of like they're going to build an ark and they're going to float on it for a while and kind of watch the rest of society go by. The faithful, though, are like, there's nothing we can do. At the end, I'm not saving my skin. I'm saving my soul. And that's the difference right there. The faithful believe that you can survive a bit longer, or you can thrive a bit longer under the Antichrist kingdom or the end of days or whatever it is. But at the end of days is going to come. The actual apocalypse is going to come. There is a supernatural judgment that's going to come by God. And he's going to judge the righteous and the unrighteous and separate them to the right and to the left. And so they are preparing spiritually for their souls. That's the faithful right there.
So do they not actually prep physically at all then? Or is it, because I do have a lot of, very religious viewers. They send me stuff, but they seem to also be preppers. But maybe, I don't know like what their contingencies are. Like,
they are prepping for the end of days. So if you use, for example, Christian eschatology to study the end times, there's going to be a 7-year period of just massive global strife. And so if you're not going to get raptured up at the beginning of that, and you're going to have to last the entire time for the, through the 7 years of tribulation, then they want to have preparedness for that. They don't want to get the mark of the beast to buy and sell food. They want to be able to grow their own stuff. They want to be able to defend themselves, etc. So yes, they are preparing for an end of days here as well, but they know at the end of those days, judgment comes for their souls.
I find myself kind of moving in and out of a lot of these. And of course, I'm not on the level of Jeff Bezos. Eventually, I'd like to get a bunker just because I think it would be a cool thing to do. But it's not at the top of my priority list, But I think if I had the money, it certainly would be. I'm very reluctant to say that one person is one or the other of these, but I think it's more of a phase that a person is in, And because I could see myself in all of these, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Most people do.
I don't necessarily believe the whole Book of Revelation stuff per se. I'm more just looking at this from a pragmatic point of view, in that, not that I really subscribe so much to overpopulation, but there is a lot of us. There's a lot more than there used to be. There's a lot more existential threats than there used to be. There's more ways that we could destroy ourselves now than ever before. And so, as a prudent empiricist, I'm looking at this from the perspective of, okay, the likelihood of something going wrong is increasing, not decreasing. Therefore, I should probably make some provisions for what might be coming.
Just to talk to your empiricist point, absolutely. You could take, if you take, one event and it's a 0.1% chance of happening. Okay, it's a 0.1% chance happening. That's a 1 in 1,000. But if you take 50.1% chances of happening per year, and you go 10 years, I mean, that starts to add up rather quickly. And over the lifetime of an individual, you're rolling the dice on a regular basis on these different threats. So absolutely, it's very pragmatic to be an empiricist on these things.
When you're writing these kind of books and when you're approaching it in this way, it would be very hard for any academic to hear what you're saying and dismiss it. Whereas there hasn't always been representatives of this genre who are able to articulate these things like yourself and others like Bradley Garrett are now doing. So why then are people still so reluctant? It seems that we're so conditioned to not prepare and to not have self-sufficiency. Is it really just that 16% we haven't, what do you think it's going to take to get over that 16% hurdle for mass adoption?
So this is what I'm seeing. I wanted to find a psychological and sociological reason for why people do absolutely nothing to people do, they buy their $1 million bunker and everything in between. So what I found is there's a theory called protection motivation theory. It's a psychological theory. It's very easy to understand, and it absolutely explained the entirety of what I saw. Protection motivation theory is very simple. It's got two parts and only two parts. There is the threat appraisal portion, and then there's the coping portion. Of the two, the coping portion is most powerful. So before I explain this, let me just take a step back. It is not healthy to doom scroll on a regular basis. And our brains were not designed to think about every single peril and every single threat that happens throughout the entirety of the world. It's overwhelming. It's psychologically unbearable. You cannot think about all 50 different types of disasters that are happening from wherever, from Mogadishu to Seattle to whatever, Toronto. You just can't. And so a lot of folks look at these things and go, okay, I just can't think of it all. And they just they flush. The government's going to take care of me. I'm not going to worry about it. They, kind of an ostrich in the head. And that's understandable from a psychological perspective. It's also understandable for people to pick one thing and truly focus on that. So people might pick on whatever, climate change. Okay, I'm very, very concerned about climate change. We're going to have more natural disasters. We're going to have hotter weather. We're going to have more temperature extremes. And so I'm going to move to a place that has less impact of that. I'm going to move to lower Alaska, or I'm going to move to Vancouver, British Columbia, or I'm going to move to these other areas that are a bit more safe because of these climate change things. But that's the one thing they focus on, and they ignore crime. They ignore pandemics. They ignore these other things because they again, psychologically, they can't process every single threat that might possibly come out with them. Or happen to them. So protection motivation theory, very simple. The threat appraisal is just this. It is the recognition and the processing of the risk. We do this intellectually, we do this emotionally, we do this socially, and we do it through repeat play. So example, it's basically the amalgamation of possibilities. It is healthy for us if we're walking through the forest and we hear a twig snap to think that that's a bear and react to that rather than think it's just, the wind and a twig fell down. Because if it's a bear and we're correct, we're going to take action to save ourselves. If it's a bear and we don't take any action because it's it's just a twig, well, that bear might come and chase us down and eat us. So psychologically, it's very healthy for us to process these risks and overreact just a little bit. So we have an intellectual processing. Our brains value this efficiency. We intellectually process these threats. Then we have an emotional processing. So for example, very similar to the intellectual processing, if you've ever swam in a freshwater area, a lake in the middle of Canada, the middle of America, nowhere near the ocean, and something brushes against your leg, the first thing you think of is shark. Even though there's no possible way it could be a shark, again, that emotional processing kicks into our intellect as well to go, oh my God, let me react to this shark. And then the more powerful of the three in longer term things is the social processing. What are other people doing around me? Toilet paper wasn't going to save you from COVID, but everyone and their brother went out and bought toilet paper. Why? Because everyone else was buying it. There were stores that were being looted for toilet paper across the world because of this fear, because they saw their friends doing it. It was like, oh my gosh, part of it's to do with this hygiene fear we have during pandemics. We naturally just want to be a lot cleaner. And so that was part of the reason why there was an actual psychological reason for this as well, but this is the social processing, and we see these things over and over. So that's the first part: threat appraisal, recognize and process the risk. And a lot of folks kind of just stop there because they don't seize their agency of, well, I'm going to be able to do something about it. So part two to protection motivation theory is the coping appraisal. This is hands down the more powerful of the two because it's the one that's recursive. It happens over and over again. You can train it, you can make it better. So what coping appraisal does is this. It says, I'm going to personalize this risk, or risks, plural, and then I'm going to own my agency. Agency is the ability and will to take control of your life. I'm going to be responsible for me. I'm going to be responsible for my family. I'm going to be responsible for my household, my community, my neighborhood, etc. And so the way that we're raised is a part of this. The way that we were taught about agency is a part of this. Do we have an internal locus of control where we believe that we control our destiny? Do we have an outer locus of control? We believe others are in control of our destiny and think life is just what happens to us. We have our Maslow's hierarchy of needs, etc. But the great thing about preparedness, folks, is this. I have not met a resilient citizen that wasn't just these people were not timid and scared of like all these bad things happening. These folks were thriving in the right here and the right now. They just felt alive to me because they took these agency, they took these threats, and they just put it in its proper place. They didn't obsess about it, but they were prepared for it. And they believed in their own abilities to be able to say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z when this bad thing happens. And it became something that, hey, I prepared for this one thing, but this other thing happened, but I was prepared for it because I prepared for this first thing. So it's like physical fitness. I went out and I was very physically fit in running, but then I had to do this other thing that wasn't running. It was whatever, bucking hay or something like that. And I could go much longer because I was just physically fit. The same kind of generalization happens in this coping appraisal in this agency where it just kind of goes and just spreads throughout all facets of your life and you thrive, not just live.
And that's the thing with preparedness. I always say a healthy prepper is somebody, like if you're doing prepping right, then you should be relatively successful in most aspects of your life. You know, you should have good physical health, you should be of sound mind, you should have a good temperament, and you should have some equanimity with spirituality, whatever that might mean to you. I think your use of the word locus of control is very important because it seems like no matter what, there's always going to be the majority of the population that's just never going to be driven with this in this way. They're never going to, they're always going to have to social reference. It's just that for some reason, some people realize that, you know, they are in control, they are responsible for what happens around them. And I think the more you take that approach to life, the more successful you're going to be. And it is quite concerning that conformity plays such a role in this, because you know the majority of people aren't going to do this until they're told. But to do it when it's not normal takes kind of a special person. Usually insanity and genius are cousins. So that's why you get so many, you know, loose cannons, as well as you do people who are very interesting.
That's one of the things I want to do with my book here, because I've read the majority of prepper books out there, and unfortunately, I know why they wrote them the way they did. But a lot of them, they start out on page one, and it's fear and gear. It's here's the fear, here's the apocalypse, here's the whatever, and then here's some gear to do things with it, and then it ends on fear as well. And just the whole book is fear, and I don't want to live that way. I don't want to. I have enough of that in my career with the military. I've seen plenty of things. I've rehearsed plenty of things. I've done exercise for plenty of things that are very apocalyptic, very negative, very bad. And I don't want to dwell on that for my entire life. I want to be able to think about the other end of the coin. There's the doomerism, and there's the optimism as well. What can I do to thrive? What can I do to be attractive? And that's what I'm trying to do with my book here, is show that there is a different way of preparedness. That's not just, henny penny, the sky is falling all the time, but I'm going to live in the here and now, and I'm going to be the best me I can possibly be. I'm going to fight local. I'm going to win local. I'm going to make the best of things. I'm going to live life to the fullest, etc. I'm going to have the best now that I can have, and still also prepare. Those things can go together. And I'd love to have some impact on national governments as well. And I'm talking to folks that are at those upper echelons across the world to try to tell them how they can sell this to their populace in a non-crazy, non-stupid way, a non-fear and gear way that just increases the agency of their populace, of their citizens writ large.
I do believe, though, that there has to be an element of fear initially. Like that kind of has to be part of the impetus, because we've had that condition out of us. People don't have to look both ways when they're crossing the road. They just look at the light. Everything is kind of a binary decision, which is basically given an instruction manual for. And therefore you don't have to be fearful of anything. You can just kind of walk through the forest and not worry about the tree branch breaking, or not even think about it, block it out altogether. But I think initially people almost have to be reminded of how vulnerable they are in the universe. And that does require an element of, you realize that if the lights go out, nobody's coming to save you or your family, right? And that the only people who are coming to you are probably going to be bad guys. People have to understand that they're alive first before they can take that next step in their preparedness evolution, which, you don't want to stay in that fear state, but that's kind of the impetus, I find.
It is. It's a catalyst. And we find this interaction between like efficiency or technology and resiliency. So as cell phone adaptation increased in the world, so did the number of phone calls for lost hikers because they're like, oh, I got my cell phone. I can go hike, pick a mountain. I can go pick a mountain and I can go hike it. And if I get into trouble, I've got my 8 ounce bottle of water. Okay, I've ran out of that. Now the weather's coming in. It's bad. Let me make a phone call and have the helicopter come and rescue me. Well, yes, that is that. Yes, we've lost some of our resiliency because our technology has made it so that we can be saved a lot easier.
I heard you say something about you introduced the concept blue zones.
Mm-hmm.
What is a blue zone?
A blue zone is fascinating. They exist all around the world, and what they are is they're areas in which they have more people that live to the age of 100 or beyond than anywhere else. I don't know the exact percentage or what it is, but we find them in Japan. You find them in Italy and other countries as well. But it's like, what is it about this area that has so many individuals that are 100 plus in age? Like, what is it? Is it something in the water? Is it something they eat? Is it the culture, et cetera? And so blue zones I've found are very much like preparedness. You kind of brought this up tangentially earlier on with the 5 different prepper types. There's 5 different prepper types, and there's also 5 different dimensions of every human being. Every single human being on the planet has 5 dimensions. It makes out the acronym SPIES: social, physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. We as American preppers or Western preppers kind of focus primarily on the physical, a little bit on the intellectual for like the skills building, et cetera. But we've kind of lost the emotional, we've kind of lost the social, we've kind of lost the spiritual. But the spiritual and the social are the ones that are actually the most powerful for different reasons. The spiritual is the one that's the most powerful for depth. Like at the end of the day, like the people that are martyred for their faith, they're never going to get up their faith. They would rather die than give up their faith. Okay, those are the spiritual folks. Very simple, similar to the faithful that I brought up earlier. The social folks are the ones that, again, if you do things and you see others doing them as well, you can do so much more. If you take one person and put them in a very precarious circumstance and say, oh, how long can you last before you break, basically, it's X. But if you give that same person just one other person in the exact same scenario, now it's the two of them, they go so much longer. There's tons of studies that kind of show this. When you have the power of 2 people or more doing things, your ability to be more resilient just exponentially increases radically, really fast. So along those lines, when you look at this SPIES thing, you see that in these blue zone areas, they have all 5. They have some sort of deep spiritual practice on a regular basis. Maybe it's, for example, let's use Japan, they do Tai Chi. And then socially, they always go out and they always drink green tea with their friends every single day at the same time and just talk. And they're just very integrated into their community. They're usually in a multi-generational area as well. They're living with their children and their grandchildren, maybe even their great-grandchildren. So they can just see that posterity go on. They can see that their actions in their life have made lives better for their seed going down the ways as well. So these blue zones have these things in common. They usually eat exceptionally healthy as well. It's not packaged food for sure. The cultures are very different as far as the cuisine is very different, excuse me. But it's usually very localized and very healthy. So pick Sardinia in Italy is a great example. There's again, like I said, numerous areas in Japan and throughout the world that have these blue zones.
So it's community that is helping people live longer in these places. That's what you found.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all 5, but community is a huge portion of that. And unfortunately, because of our technology and our wealth right now, we become so atomized. I have 2 children right now. Thankfully, they're both adults. One of them lives rather close to me, about 90 minutes away. Another one lives several states away. So will we ever live in the same, state together? Probably not. Will we ever live in the same city together? Probably not. That's much different than human culture was, especially prior to World War II. We usually stuck together in family units where you were born is where you died. And we've kind of lost that. These blue zones have not lost that. Where they're born is where they're going to die.
That's fascinating stuff. So yourself personally, like where would you put yourself on this scale, homesteader, sentinel, Noah, faithful, interdependent?
I always like to say that just like you, prepping is the great gateway drug to homesteading. I started out initially as one of the faithful. My father's an evangelical Christian. I had that as my belief. Definitely believe in the end of days. Definitely believe in the Antichrist. That's where I started, but then I branched into other things. I joined the army, so I obviously picked up all the sentinel skills. I wanted to kind of put this out to others, so I have some of the interdependence. But the one thing I'm lacking right now, because I move every 2 to 3 years, is I'm lacking a homestead. I'm retiring here pretty soon. I'm going to have a homestead for my wife. We're going to have bees. We're going to have chickens. We're going to have an orchard. And I'm very much looking forward to just homesteading and then sharing that wealth of knowledge and just that wealth of bounty with others and helping them in their resilience journey for sure.
Well, a friend of mine, Sean James, over at the My Self-Reliance YouTube channel, he got me thinking about homesteading and just the agrarian approach and the pitfalls of it. And one of them is that it really does kind of pin you down. And he's doing a more of a hunter-gatherer thing because it allows him to kind of be a bit more nomadic and mobile. So I'm starting to look at it in other ways too, because I know some people who are doing the horticulture thing, and they got cows and they basically can't leave the house. I mean, they're stuck there.
It's an investment.
It's a commitment because you almost have to have somebody there all the time to watch the animals. So I think there's a couple ways to look at it. And, I'm starting to consider the latter, because I think there's something about just being able to kind of pick up and move to another location, or to hunt your deer or your moose once or twice a year and you're good. And then, for the rest of the year, you don't have to tend to various animals, which is not always going to be sustainable model for a larger community per se. But I guess if you had a larger community, then you wouldn't need to feel so, to take on that responsibility all on yourself. But I know it was just a different perspective that he told me, and I never heard it in those terms before.
Well, for you specifically, a way to do things, I'm not making suggestions, but, if this is something to think about, is that there's a way to basically part-time this, but also get full-time benefits. So, for example, you could go out and get a plot of land. Let's just say, for example, 20 acres. Okay, I have my 20 acres, and I want to be in my 20 acres from whatever, March to October of every single year. And then the rest of the year, I want to go out and do the other things I want to do. I want to travel. I don't want to be pinned down, et cetera. But I still want somebody to raise my livestock while I'm gone. Well, what you can do is you can have a few plots of land on there, of not necessarily a tiny home, but a smaller home. And you can work with a local land grant university or college to say, hey, will you guys teach? You can use my cattle, you can use my orchard, you can use my chickens, my sheep, whatever. And you can teach your classmates a course on agronomy or animal husbandry, et cetera, over the winter months while I'm gone, basically, and have somebody raise those while you're not there, but you're still getting a benefit. So basically, you're not paying for it because the university is getting a benefit, you're getting a benefit. It's kind of a zero cost sum game, but then you can still not be tied down entirely to one thing. Or just find somebody that's in their retirement age and doesn't want to move around anymore because of health reasons, that still has the skills to do that. Or the exact opposite, somebody who is a college student who's 18, 19, 20 years old and definitely wants to have this kind of lifestyle and will live there full time while they're going to school in those winter months and watch your stuff. These are ways we can kind of get past these barriers that we've had as we move back towards this more multi-generational, more community, more neighbor-based association with the land, for sure.
Yeah, I guess the more extensive your network, the more it will allow you to do this. I mean, we have chickens, we have bees. We're in a very similar situation as you're in right now, and it is a big responsibility. Right now, I don't really care to travel too frequently, but in the future I might. So I could see myself perhaps shifting to that more nomadic sort of cabin in the woods, non-greenhouse. Like we had a greenhouse this year, and every week, I mean, this thing is just pumping out vegetables. I never realized how much food you can get out of a well-maintained greenhouse, but it's incredible. And but you have to be on top of it. I mean, you can't leave for more than a week.
Yep, that's my wife is right now. So she's definitely tied to her garden for sure.
Yeah. What are you most concerned about? You said something interesting. You said that you're an end of days guy, which is weird because you seldom see an intellectual like yourself also have that religious background. Is that something you would say you still believe, or has it been a little bit more diluted with your extensive academic?
No, I started out this way, and I've never lost it. If you look throughout the world, you look at let's take 4 religions. Let's take Mormonism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. That's 4.4 billion people. So over half the globe has some sort of belief about end of days through their various faiths. So for Islam, it's the 12th Mahdi. For Christians and Jews and Mormons, it's the Antichrist. I've never lost that. I know that people have been looking for Christ's return since the Gospels have happened. They're sitting on the edge of their roof waiting, and Jesus is like, no, go back to work. So I know that it may not happen in my lifetime, but I need to be prepared for that. I think it's just part of again, just like everything else, it's a healthy part of a developed Christian faith. So that's me personally. But I also look at other things as well. So The biggest question I got last year from especially left of center journalists when they talked to me about this question is it was a fear of civil war. They thought that Trump was going to lose the election and that the right was going to freak out and cause civil war. The last time I saw that was when Charlie Kirk got assassinated just a couple months ago. About this spike of, oh my gosh, is America ready for civil war right now? And here's my answer to all of that. Imagine if you were a hospital administrator at a major metropolis. Pick a big city in your country, wherever it is. Okay. And someone said, well, what do you think is the first person that's going to come through our emergency room doors today? And you're like, well, I don't know. It could be somebody that got in a car accident. It could be somebody that had a heart attack. It could be somebody this or that. I'm not sure. What I do see, though, and what I study more rather than what the specific is the trends. So there's a word out there and it's called polycrisis. Polycrisis is this cluster of related events, global risk with compounding effects. So sometimes 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4, or sometimes 2 + 2 equals 7. So I look at polycrisis and all these different things that kind of interweave on each other and synergize in ways. But the word that I'm introducing right now into the lexicon is called polycollapse, because I believe that whatever collapse does come, when it comes, it's going to come exceptionally quickly. I'm not going to say what that thing is because there's different ways that it could get triggered, but when it happens, it's going to go fast. So polycollapse is a simultaneous or near simultaneous collapse of multiple systems. That's what I watch out for. That's one of the reasons why I'm really trying to get America and Canada and Britain and Germany and the world more prepared for those types of things. Again, not in a doomsday kind of way, but in a way to say, hey, we have a very fragile system right now. There's a lot of robustness as well. There's a lot of good people doing good things. But if a collapse does come, it could come very quickly. And I want us to be as prepared as we can rather than have a repeat of, the grapes of wrath and a dust bowl and everyone, is moving to California. Well, those options aren't there anymore. We need to be far more resilient and robust in the now and today. And if that day never comes, oh, well, I'm not wasting my days. I'm growing healthy food. I'm raising chickens, etc. I'm thriving in the now, but just in case, I'm prepared. And I want as many people to be that way as well.
For someone who doesn't understand the dynamic of how things are more interconnected now and how there could be this cascading effect that would trigger a rapid collapse, like what does that look like for you? What is a polycollapse? Like, what are some of the components of that?
Sure. Let's give some hypothetical examples. Let's say that we had the Japanese earthquake in 2011. It was this massive earthquake that happened off the coast of Japan. It triggered a tsunami. The tsunami came over and hit the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. We had a nuclear meltdown, which is still impacting right now. If you look at TEPCO's numbers, TEPCO says it's going to take another 40 years minimum to clean up after that. And they removed, I think, a few grams of radioactive material just earlier on this year or late last year out of several thousand pounds of radioactive material. So this could take a while. So this is kind of like a cascading disaster. So what would a polycollapse look like? Well, let's say that the New Madrid seismic zone or the Cascadia subduction zone, which are both earthquake plate tectonic elements, trigger a 9.0 earthquake, and we'll use Cascadia. So the West Coast gets hit with a massive 9.0 earthquake as well as a massive tsunami. So we have the entire West Coast now, a large chunk of it wiped out. Okay, so that's one thing. That's a natural disaster that happened. And at the same time of that happening, well, that's going to trigger probably an economic collapse in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Seattle, Washington, in Portland, Oregon, in Los Angeles, San Francisco, et cetera. So now we have this economic collapse. Well, now because we have this economic collapse, we're not paying out things as far as benefits. Maybe we're not paying out food stamps because now we're reacting to all these people that are dead, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dead, depending on what the scenario is. And so now people are freaking out and they're going feral because delivery systems aren't coming in because they're going into these impacted areas. So now Texas pops off because food isn't being delivered there because it's going to whatever, Bend, Oregon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These things, build on themselves and they start to do this polycollapse. Well, now that the United States is now dealing with things, we've brought in all of our military forces back from America to deal with this, these hundreds of thousands and millions of people that have been affected on the West Coast. So now we no longer have military forces in pick a country. Now another opportunistic adversary says, you know what? This is a perfect time for me to seize Taiwan. This is a perfect time for me to invade all the way through Russia or through Ukraine. This is the perfect time for me to, pick your crisis. These polycollapse happens because these things just keep building and building and these systems fall down almost like dominoes.
And that's kind of what we've seen during COVID, although it was a bit more protracted. So we've seen COVID was kind of like the wound, and then that allowed the infection probably not the best metaphor for that to come in, which would be, the financial crisis. We've seen the riots ensue from people being locked down for too long. Then we've seen the subsequent mania in the markets that started a chain reaction of economic stress, which I think percolated a lot of the conflicts that we're seeing around the world right now, which increased the likelihood of tensions arising elsewhere. And the more economic strife, the more geopolitical strife, and so on and so forth, the more civil strife, and then it's kind of a doom loop, it seems. I kind of am of the same persuasion right now. My central focus is pretty much just doing what I'm doing, but there's so many things to prepare for. There's so many reasons to prepare, but at the end of the day, for me, preparedness is about self-improvement. And there's a lot of other things a person could be doing that are a lot worse. So I don't think there's necessarily a need to justify it, but what are your thoughts on the geopolitical state of things and the tensions around the world?
So it's fascinating. They did a world study, and it's the World Economic Forum. So say what you want about their politics. I'm sure some of your listeners have very strong opinions on the World Economic Forum, but there's a lot of different organizations that look at what's going on globally. So they do a survey every single year, and it's a global risk study. And they ask industry leaders, they ask politicians, they ask businessmen, they ask academics, et cetera. And they're like, what are you the most afraid of right now? What's your 1 year fear? What's your 2 year fear, your 5 year fear, 10 year fear, et cetera? So this is what they said. The last survey was done roughly around this time, 2024. So they said, okay, this is what we're kind of seeing just across the world. We're seeing declining optimism. We're seeing this growing sense of societal fragmentation. We're seeing environmental risks. We're seeing these fears of kind of under the radar technological risk, for example, artificial intelligence, and basically an overall fragmenting of the global order, which was fascinating because roughly a year ago, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence under the Biden administration did a very similar study. And they said, what are you guys afraid of? And they said, we see in the next 10 years, like this global order that's happened ever since the end of the Cold War, fragmenting and maybe going to a multipolar world. So two entirely different assessments of things, both unclassified, that came out and like our threat is like a fear of a fragmented world. Okay. What about going out to like the other top 5 threats? The top 5 threats for 2025 were state-based armed conflict. We were looking at the war in Gaza. We were looking at the war in Ukraine, the fears of Taiwan, et cetera. After that, extreme weather. After that, geoeconomic confrontation. What does that mean? That was the tariff threat in case President Trump were to win the election. This was, again, back around the time of the elections. People didn't know what was going to happen. And then misinformation and disinformation. And then finally, societal polarization. I mean, you look at those threats. And again, if you try to psychologically inculcate all of those into you, it's rather difficult. It's rather hard. That's why a lot of academics do this kind of flushing of things. They keep things separated. They keep things compartmented. I'm thinking about these things in a very academic sense. I'm not actually pairing it to what I'm going to do at home, which I found very fascinating. So that's what they did for 1 year. And then I'll just jump out to the ones for the 10-year mark. So the 10-year marks, extreme weather, the top 4 were all ecological. Extreme weather, biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse, critical change to Earth systems, natural resource shortages, and then also misinformation and disinformation. So 4 ecological, 1 societal, sociological. That's what they fear looking at the globe.
Yeah, I've actually came across that study before, and it seems rather intuitive. I don't disagree with that assessment. I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? That if we're entering a period of where we're using more and more energy and more people, and there's more scarce resources, people are going to fight over stuff, and it doesn't seem as though we're going to curtail our energy use. So it's only going to increase the likelihood of potential tensions. Chris, where can people find more information about you? Do you have a YouTube channel?
I don't have a YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter. So at Prep for Disasters. I'm decently active on that, and that'll link you if you just looked up my profile. It'll take you to www.resilientcitizens.com. Again, I'm in the active Army, but I'm not appearing here, and my book is not a representation or endorsed by the Department of Defense. I'm not, or my current command right now. It's my personal academic passion and my professional passion as well. But I do want to just help people live the best life they can have. I want people to be able to fight local and win local. I want people to be able to get better every day and to live life to the fullest. That's kind of my message to folks as they're going through things. It doesn't have to be for doomsday. It can be for every day. And you can thrive in this life right now and still prepare for potential catastrophes or just negative impacts in your life.
I seen you on a channel multiple times. Is it Doomer Optimism?
It was a friend of mine started that podcast up. I did about 5 or 6 podcasts through her. I think I did 4 at the beginning of this book launch, just interviewing some individuals that were of these various prepper genres. And then I appeared once in a while just to talk shop, talk resilience.
All right, guys. Well, if you like what you heard today, I'm going to post a link to a couple of those videos in the description. But I would also encourage you to check out Chris's book. Well worth it, and a lot of unique takes and ideas with respect to this preparedness stuff. It's been excellent conversation, and I look forward to potentially doing it again someday. Yeah, thanks for coming out, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Nate. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.